Here we are in Scottsdale, Arizona, where in this nondescript building behind me lies the Disneyland for guitarists. This is the Fender and Gretsch corporate headquarters. Today we'll be speaking with Joe Carducci from Gretsch. Okay, we're here with Joe Carducci in Arizona at Gretsch, Product Marketing Specialist is your job title now.
Correct.
And we'll get into how you got there.
Sure.
But where did you get started and when did you get started with music?
I know right to the day. February 9th, 1964, Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show was the defining moment for me. And I saw that and certainly the music looked like a lot of fun. You'd never seen anything like that before. You never heard anything like that before. And again, at 9 years old, when girls are screaming, you're not sure what that's about.
Right.
But it just looked like a heck of a whole lot of fun. I remember after it was all over, at the end of the night, I'm combing my hair down in front of my eyes and getting my mom's shears and cutting my bangs. I wore it to school the next day. I wanted to be a Beatle.
Perfect.
And but there you go. Not only did it affect me, but it affected thousands and thousands of young people globally when that happened. And it's no secret that the MI industry just exploded after the Beatles hit on the Ed Sullivan Show. Even Fred Gretsch tells the story about the day after the phones wouldn't stop ringing at the Gretsch headquarters in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah,
that's
crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing that something like that could cause guitar companies and whatever else to just explode afterwards.
Totally, yeah.
Because a guitar is it's not that easy of a product for a lot of normal working class families to be able to afford, especially if they see, George Harrison playing the Chet Atkins model was probably a pricier model back then.
Sure.
Right.
And again, we're the household where I grew up in. We were a very humble home, and to ask my parents to buy me a guitar, it was like out of the question.
Right.
And I took a paper bag and cut it open and drew a picture of a guitar, and that was my guitar for about 2 months. I think my parents thought I lost my mind, where they finally broke down, and my dad went to Sears and bought me an acoustic guitar, which I still own to this day.
That's fantastic.
That's way cool.
I mean, and that just goes to show what it meant to you.
Totally.
You've never, I don't think you've ever taken music or guitar playing for granted.
Yeah, totally. My parents got me into guitar lessons right away. Started playing and getting paid for money at the age of 12. There were some local kids that were 14, 15 years old. I was 12. I was 11 when I joined the band. So to me, they were like grown men.
Yeah, right.
But they were kids, really.
Yeah.
But very gifted musicians, and they were the first. The other neighborhood kids, we'd learn song and try to teach each other. But yet, when I joined that band, they were already doing 3-part harmonies, and it was a great education for me to get started into music and putting it all together. And my dad taking me to gigs and waiting in the car for me while I got dressed up and had my suit and my little tie, and all of a sudden you're a little kid and you're playing music and people are dancing to it, and at the end of the night they give you money. It's like, I'm down with this, man.
You can't. You're like, I found my career. This is what life's all about. This is great. So you did that, and through your teen years.
Yep.
But coming back to what you do now with this company.
Sure.
You've been with this company almost 44. This year is 44 years.
Correct. 44 years. Yeah.
So you joined the ranks with the Fender Corporation at the time as a teenager.
I did. I just turned 18.
Okay.
I started out as an amp assembler.
Okay.
And then at that time it was a union, and they had a union book. You turn to the center page, you could see how much all the jobs paid. So certainly you go, I'm thinking about buying a car, maybe we want to get married. I want to do this job up here, and you just kind of maneuver your thinking and stuff, and what do you need to know to be able to do that job? And basically the guys that made the higher end money at that time in the factory were quality control people.
Okay.
And so my very first quality control job, my title was I was a body inspector, and I used to inspect the bodies after they got they were pin routed at that time and finished sanded right before they go into paint. And I would be the one that would the sanders would bring them over to my desk, and you'd look at them, measure them with calipers to make sure the neck depths were right. And if there was a mineral stain, like say in the center, you code that one to be painted black. Or if it had mineral stains around the side but not in the center, you could mark that one sunburst. And if you got one that's like immaculate, if it's made of ash, you'd go, N for natural. And that's how the coding...
That's really interesting. I didn't know. So you would basically decide the colors based on the wood grains and everything else.
That's right, at that point in time.
Okay.
And then I know even our custom shop to this day, on the fender side, they do... what I saw firsthand, let's say a guitar was coded to be sunburst, and it made it all the way down to final assembly, and the final assembly guy who's setting it up, gets it all done, and he turns and puts it on the rack and hits the back of the body and puts a ding in it. It's like, oh no. So he has to reject it. It gets all torn apart. They don't throw the body away. It goes back to the wood shop. They try to touch it up or fill that dent as much as possible. Came back to me, all of a sudden, that guitar is now black.
Yeah.
But as it wore, though, over the years, the finish would come off of the black, and you would see it sunburst underneath.
There you go.
And that's how our custom shop even does guitars to this day that are colored in that fashion. In other words, it was hit or dinged, and now after that the relicing, if you will, the war spots, there's another color underneath it. Anyway, that's some of the crazy stuff they used to do back then.
That's fantastic.
Sure.
It's like a little surprise underneath
it. It is, yeah.
So you strategically kind of moved your way through the company as far as what job you could move to.
Yes, yeah.
Probably as like seniority happens,
Absolutely.
right? Because you're part of a union.
Absolutely.
So how long were you in the actual, like let's say in the production of the guitars?
Right, productions, even through quality control, probably 15, 16, maybe 17 years in manufacturing. And then from there, I worked in the National Service Center at Fender at that time. And my role there was Fender guitars and Rhodes pianos. You could blindfold me and I could take a Rhodes piano completely apart and put it back together again.
Wow.
Because at that time, Fender owned Rhodes as well. And that was another one of the many jobs that I held. I was an inspector in the Rhodes piano department. And they're kind of big and bulky. So they encouraged you, if there was something that needed adjustment, just go ahead and use your tools and fix it so you can get it and move it on down the line and get it boxed up and send it out the store. So I totally understood how they worked, and I used to be able to hot rod them. I used to work for Rhodes pianos. Now we're talking the 70s. Gosh, Chick Corea, I used to work on his pianos. Jeff Lorber, Patrice Rushen. I worked on pianos for, a whole bunch of famous people that were playing Rhodes during that era. That was real hot.
And they would call you directly for it?
Yes,
because you knew how to, you were the guy to go to at this point.
I remember at that service center, I was in there for probably 10 years. Every year, we would get a phone call from the Ray Charles management, and they would say, "Okay, Ray's getting ready to go on tour. His tech will be there on Thursday. We got a couple of pianos. Would you go through them completely?" And the instructions that I always got from management in the service center: just replace all the tines and just max it out. And he had two of them. One was a backup. And then he would go out into the world and tour the world literally with those two Rhodes pianos. Wow. And that was real exciting, knowing that Ray played on those keys. That's awesome.
Course, it's very exciting. I mean, it's like that much closer to the magic. Like
there you go. There you go.
Where the magic happened.
Yeah, of course.
And then so to end up, in the position you're in now.
Right.
So this is more, office job / you are out. You're out in the world.
Correct. Yeah.
Representing the product and selling the product. Now, where do you start in these ranks, coming up to where you are now?
Yeah, let me think. I want to say in 94, 93, 94, 95, right around in there, I started doing marketing for all the offshore made Fender and Squier products at that time.
Okay.
And so some of the projects I was involved in were the Noel Redding Jazz Bass was my project, and brought that to market. The Geddy Lee Jazz Bass was mine. The Ventures guitars, we made 3 guitars for the guys from the Ventures. That was my project as well. And gosh, there's other ones that escape me now, but Artist Signature Models was part of my deal that I did at that time, which certainly working with offshore vendors goes hand in hand what I'm doing now with Gretsch. And although we do have a custom shop in Corona, California, and that's headed up by Steven Stern, there's 100% American-made Gretsch guitars for those people that say, I want one, but it's got to be American-made. Okay, we can do that. And anything else that you want to do that's outrageous on the guitars, our custom shop will do.
Sure.
But it's a wonderful brand. It's definitely going out in the travels, and you meet guys that own Gretsch guitars. It's like a brotherhood, if you will. That when two guys meet, or musicians that own Gretsch guitars, it's like almost like 2 Italians meeting each other, and like you're related in somehow. But it's a wonderful brand to be a part of. It's got a great legacy.
He does.
You know, it's been around 130 something years. It's been around a long time, and it's all about family.
And there still is, the Gretsch family is still at the helm of the
that's
company.
right. Yep, that's right. And even though that my office here in Scottsdale is at the FMIC headquarters, which also all the administration is done for Fender, Squier guitars, Jackson guitars, Charvel guitars, and the EVH brand of guitars and amplifiers. Fender owns all of those brands except Gretsch.
I was going to ask you, because this is part of, I want to hear that story, because part of what you do, going out and really getting the brand out there more and more and more, people know the brand, but was there a turning point at some point, like where was Gretsch ever owned by Fender?
No, it
never was.
It never was owned by Fender.
Okay.
Long story short, when Fred Gretsch bought the company back in 1985 from the Baldwin Company, basically all he got was just the name and the patents and some inventory that was left over from Baldwin. And he found this factory in Nagoya, Japan, that was old school guitar building. It's not like, where they put 12 planks of wood and guy hits enter on a computer and burn, and 60 seconds later they're practically done. Yeah. There's top, backs, and sides, and they're glued together, and they're very labor intensive. In fact, at that factory, where they get their builders from, there's 2 luthier colleges that they resource from. One's in Tokyo, one's right there in Nagoya. And we take up probably 95% of their production. And the guys that work in there, they're very proud of the brand, and totally get it and understand it. And it's been a wonderful relationship. And so that same factory makes all our Pro Series guitars that we make today.
Okay. Fantastic.
I've been there many times too. That's a lot of
Have you?
Yeah.
I was in Japan for 40 hours, and it was amazing. I need to go back more, and I would love to see that that side of it.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. So that actually brings me back to part of what you were saying earlier. I mean, look at all these people on the wall. I mean, everybody knows. Most people will know who most of these people are. There's some that not everybody knows, but it's a great brand. People love the brand, but it has been specifically linked to certain things like country and rockabilly and stuff like this over the years. And I think that's why a lot of these brotherhoods form. So as a businessman, is it hard to try to pull something, a little further into the mainstream? How do you get the new pop band to use Gretsch? How do you get the new rock and roll? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And to that point, just this year we introduced 3 new series of guitars. And the common denominator about all those guitars, to accommodate pop music and light gauge strings, we're doing things like pinning the bridges and having pickups with more output on them, and no load tone pots and treble bleed circuits on the master volume to make it more performance worthy for a guitarist, the most discriminating guitarist, how they play the guitar today versus 1940, the late 40s and 50s.
Yes.
In 50s, there was no light gauge strings back then yet. The heavy gauge strings helped hold the bridge on the body.
Yeah, it kept the neck straight from the boat, from the angle back, right? Baseball bats, 6 baseball bats on there. Yeah.
There you go. So anyway, but nowadays, it's not uncommon. People use 10s. Some people use 9s, the gauge strings. So for years, why heavy metal, it didn't really get into the metal world, if you will, because the bridges just wouldn't stay still. And so if it moves just a little tiny bit, you're out of tune. So we pin them so they don't move anymore, and you'll see that there's more Gretsch guitars being used in pop music today.
That's great. And this is a lot to do with what you've done, I'd imagine, because also what I was going to say is, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're out there with these people, I don't think I see anybody promoting a brand as thoroughly as you do.
Oh, thank you so much.
I mean, it seems like, I'm sure there is somebody for another company, other companies doing this stuff, but it seems like you are just really out there and really getting, and it's growing. I see the Gretsch name. I see it in other people's hands. I see Good Charlotte, those guys are using Gretsch guitars now in like a pop punk band. I've seen the Gretsch guitars on, the Nashville, right? The TV show, right? So you've obviously have gotten the reach out a little further in different directions.
Yep.
So, I mean, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
I know it's a lot of work,
and we're still working on that too.
Yeah. I'm sure it's fun.
Yeah, our phones are ringing all day long from more contemporary artists that, not only I talked about things that we're doing to make the guitars more live performance friendly, and that so that you could perform with them night after night, every song, and have them maintain and stay in tune and sound great. But it's also a fashion statement.
Of course.
And certainly we're seeing a lot of Gretsch guitars in the world of punk rock, and boy, I knew we made the right decision when we worked with Billy Duffy to do his Billy Duffy White Falcon. When they came through Phoenix, I went to the show, and I remember the opening band had ended, and they, now they're clearing that for opening band's gear out of the way. They took the big black drape off the, the Colts drum set, and there's Billy Duffy's amp rig. And soon as the guitar tech walked around the amp holding Billy Duffy's White Falcon, the arena just erupted, and there was nobody else that walked on stage. It was just the guitar.
Just the Falcon.
And it's so identifiable now with that guy and his sound. And certainly the Cult is not a rockabilly band. It's not a 50s band. It's a rock band.
You're absolutely
and
right.
He plays loud and he does all the things, but he plays it down low and it looks great.
Yeah.
And it's
anyway. I love the Cult. I've seen the Cult.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean he has. He's has a specific look, and especially with that guitar.
Sure.
And to see that guitar, especially that guitar, the White Falcon is such the Gretsch guitar.
Yep.
It's as big and as hollow body and as sort of decadent as you can get.
Totally.
And you don't see stuff like that in hard rock or metal, and he makes that thing sound so amazing, and it makes them sound so amazing, and it was, I think, the perfect idea to actually do a signature model with it.
On that one is awesome.
You have to.
You have to.
You were showing me some stuff earlier. I liked the story you were telling me about this guy.
Yeah, so
right
this guitar that we show hanging right here, this is an actual 1959 Gretsch 6120. And when FMIC got involved with Gretsch, which I want to clarify, really the missing piece of the puzzle for the Gretsch company up to that point is Fred Gretsch didn't have global distribution. And that's where Fender came in, because we have distribution all over the planet. And it's a great relationship, because certainly Gretsch doesn't compete with Fender. It's a entirely different animal, if you will. But utilizing the FMIC distribution channels helps us get Gretsch guitars all over the world.
And that's how the relationship came together.
That's how, yes.
And then you were so before we get to that, so then when were you when did you shift from Fender to Gretsch?
Okay, the relationship started in 2002.
Okay.
And by 2004, we slowly started changing elements of the guitars to make them more accurate to the way that they made them in Brooklyn, New York. We found that guys that were collectors of Gretsch guitars, and if you look at vintage magazines and what they're going for, the Baldwin era guitars don't fetch as much. Similar to like what happened with Fender when they were bought out by CBS, a big corporation came in. We got to make them faster. We need to make more margin on this stuff. And you figure out ways to do that. This isn't toasters. ears. This isn't
Yeah.
this is a musical instrument that people hold it up against their body and it resonates and you express your soul. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And you touch
Yes.
it and you hold it. And so when the Gretsch family took over the business, they basically had some Baldwin era guitars that they replicated, which were great. The company really took off from, let's see, he introduced the guitars back in 1990. It took him 5 years for the production to happen. And then things went real well. And then, and again, it was in 2002 that the relationship with Fender started. And at that point, that's where that guitar comes in. When we were researching the instruments, how can we, what's the mojo? What's going on here?
Right.
And we found that definitely the DNA of the guitars that were made in the Brooklyn, New York factory, there was something about those guitars, the way they were made. And so rather than cutting it in half to try to figure out how they put it together, we bought that instrument and took it to a cancer clinic and did CAT scans on it. So it's three-dimensional. You could see the layers of wood and how it's put together, the purfling inside, how it's put together, the layers of the wood. And we cracked the code. And so there you go. And this is a brand new version. It's a brand new guitar we just introduced this year. This is a replica of, or I should say, the model is a 1955 Chet Atkins. So when Chet Atkins was signed to Gretsch, in fact, I just found this the other day. Here's a copy. I'm not going to let you zero in on it, of the original contract between Chester Atkins and Fred Gretsch.
Wow.
But that's not Fred Gretsch today, but that was the other Fred.
Yeah.
And we found it in our archives, and it was, wow, we got to take a picture of that.
That's amazing.
And his royalties. But anyway, that was the first instrument that didn't have the swivel arm, though. It had a stationary arm where you couldn't move it out of the way.
Oh, okay.
But the branding iron first appeared, on that guitar. You notice the inlays are very, steer head, cactus, fences.
Yeah, desert flower.
There you go. The steer on the headstock. As the story goes, the guys that were Chet had a certain vision of what he wanted the guitar to be. The ornamentation wasn't his idea.
Okay.
It was the guys in Brooklyn, New York, thinking, "Oh, he's a country western." I think he'll like this. Chet didn't really like it.
It's almost kind of like racist in a sense.
Anyway, as the Chet Atkins models evolved, that stuff slowly disappeared from his models, but it's part of the charm now. Now there's people that got to have that,
of course,
those elements.
And if you're replicating 1955,
there you go.
That is the element, right?
There
Except for, like you said, except for the swivel on the tremolo
Correct.
system, right? So, and I would have been very upset if you actually had to cut this one in half.
Totally.
Because these don't exist.
Exactly.
And you need to keep this one. This needs to be in the Gretsch vaults.
It is
for life.
There you go.
Don't touch it. Just let's look at it. So, Joe, there's a lot of memorabilia in these halls. I want to look at it. I want to hear stories. Is that okay?
I've got stories for you. Come on with me. Let's go.
All right. Lead the way.
Let's go over to the George Harrison office this way. Right next door.
What do we have in store?
Yeah, let's start with this photo right here. I'd love to share this story of this photo right here. This is at the EMI Studios where the Beatles were recording their very first album, which of course in America it was called Meet the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And in England it was called something else. But that Gretsch duo Jet, George played on the very first album. So Love Me Do, I Want to Hold Your Hand, that was the guitar that he used. The interesting thing about the picture is George is sporting a black eye. You can look very closely over here. And as the story goes, a few nights prior, the Beatles had played the Cavern Club, and it was the first gig that they played with Ringo, and they had let Pete Best go. They asked Brian Epstein to do the dirty work to tell him that he was no longer in the band, and they hired Ringo. And the Beatles at that time in Liverpool were so popular, each one of those guys, including Pete Best, had his own following within that band. So there was quite a few people that went that night to the Cavern Club that were upset that Pete wasn't in the band anymore. No. And as they finished their set and they were walking off stage, somebody cold-cocked George and it smacked him in the eye. That's what the black eye was.
And in the studio the next day with the black eye, or a couple days later.
There you go, with this Gretsch duo Jet.
Poor guy, but yeah, with the Gretsch, perfect. What a great shot.
It is a great shot, young guy. Let's go inside this office right over here.
Okay. So where are we now?
We are in the George Harrison conference room.
Which, just to explain to the people at home, all the conference rooms are named after somebody and are themed, correct? Around the whole facility.
That is correct.
Which is great.
That is great. Yeah, we have the Geddy Lee office room and the Brian Setzer office, and
Jimi
Hendrix one, and the Jeff Beck room, the Eric Clapton room, and here we're in the George Harrison room. We like to have a lot of our Gretsch meetings in here because of the mojo of the room.
Sure.
And I shared with you my experience with February 9th, 1964, and the Beatles, right?
Yes.
So this was a project that we did about, it's been 3 to 4 years now. And it's no secret that George, the very first Beatles record, Meet the Beatles, he had a black Duo Jet. In fact, what I'm holding here is prototype number 1. This was handmade by Stephen Stern at our custom shop. It's got the custom shop logo right here on the back of the headstock.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a wonderful story. When I met with the Harrisons, Olivia, George's widow, I wanted to know everything about the guitar. And up to that point, there was some footage that George talks about buying the guitar from a sailor. And he saw an ad in the paper. And so when I met with the Harrisons, of course, I'm very inquisitive, and I asked, gee, do we know the name of that guy that he got the guitar from? And Olivia wasn't sure at first, and it finally came to her later that afternoon. She asked one of her office people to write the name down on a piece of paper. The guy's name was Ian Harrower.
Okay.
And with the power of the internet, I found the guy. He was still alive. And he still lives in Liverpool, and he was a sailor. And I'm going to try to make a long story very, very, very short. He was a guitar player. He was a cook on a merchant ship that was stationed in Liverpool. Their route was they would go from Liverpool to New York, drop off goods, pick up goods, and come back.
Okay.
And that was his route. And he was a cook on that ship, but he was also a guitar player. And his band used to play at the Cavern Club and a lot of halls where the Beatles used to play. And we used to have a lot of dances back then.
Okay.
And so I had heard the story about that George became aware of the guitar, because he says it in his recording that he saw an ad in the paper. I asked Ivan about that. Do you still have the paper? And Ivan says, no, there was no paper. I didn't have any money to place an ad. He said, my saxophone player in my band knew Stu Sutcliffe, who was at that time the bass player with the Beatles, and shared with him that he wanted to sell this guitar. And as the story goes, he said they exchanged phone numbers. George wanted to buy a good guitar. As he says, this was the very first good guitar that he ever owned in his life. And
straight from his mouth.
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah.
And so we tracked down Ivan and interviewed him and told us the whole story, how they met, and how much he paid for it. Originally, Ivan bought it in Manny's Music in Brooklyn, New York in 1957. And we could tell by the original serial number that it was made that year. He paid $210 for it, and had all the customs document when he brought it back to England.
Right.
But the guitar, what we confirmed, again, making a long story short, this is a model is called the Duo Jet. And the way that Gretsch makes a Duo Jet, the top is black, and then the back and the sides and the back of the neck is a walnut stain. When we got this guitar, when we got the original guitar that you saw what George was holding with the black eye.
Well, let's back up. So basically what you did is you got that original guitar.
That we did.
You had George's Duo Jet.
The family still owns it.
And this is prototype 1 of your guys' attempt at the replica of that guitar in the condition it is at that moment.
There you go, yes.
Yes, good.
We bought a first class ticket just for the guitar to bring it to the United States. It was great.
Sat in a leather chair, got champagne on the perfect.
And so when we got the guitar and we opened it up, we got, wow, it's all black. And what a funky paint job. And we noticed right away that even the Gretsch logo on the headstock looked really cheesy, that it appeared that somebody just took a piece of little tape over it and then spray painted the whole guitar. What we learned was that the Rickenbacker that John played during the Cavern Club days was a blonde Rickenbacker, whatever the model that was. what we learned was that that's the same guitar that he played on the Ed Sullivan Show, which on the Ed Sullivan Show, it was black. And if you see the early photos of the Beatles during the time period playing at the Cavern Club, they wore all black. And sharing the story with Danny as we got a hold of the guitar and
Danny Harrison.
Danny Harrison, thank you.
George's son, right?
Yes, he oversees the estate. And we agreed that probably John and George used the same can of spray paint to paint their guitars all black.
To have the look.
To have the look, yeah.
Was this the leather jacket days?
Yeah, the leather pants.
Yeah.
And just black.
Yeah.
And so
the rocker look.
There you go.
The British rocker look.
And so there was no doubt that, at that time when George bought the guitar, he was 17. They were kids.
And so if the guitar was going to be screwed up, at least it was those two knuckleheads.
There you go.
Doing it. In the back alley, like spraying it down. Well, George and John were out there spraying it. That's amazing. And if you could prove that, but I guarantee that's probably what happened.
No doubt.
That is fantastic.
And Danny, he oversees the estate for his dad.
Right.
So the original guitar, the family owns it. They keep it in their office in London.
Okay.
And Danny said, he says whenever he was in that office, he loves to play that guitar. He was very familiar with it. So when we finished this guitar, and it was time to call Danny up and say, okay, we're project. Here's the prototype one for your approval. And the idea was to only make 60 of these globally from our custom shop. And I mean like this. I mean, with all the nicks and dings and scratches.
And hand done.
And all hand done.
The custom shop guy is doing all this. I was going to ask, how do you get the rust? How does this happen? Like the dust and the rust and everything on the pickups?
Yeah, and if you look at the original guitar, that green stuff is on the original guitar.
It's the sweat growing, algae, not algae, but it's some kind of fungus.
Something's growing.
So
but we left it. Yeah, they have ways of doing this. Certainly like a secret recipe. I don't want to share that.
Okay, I got it.
But they pay attention to detail. But I can tell you all the nicks and dings and scratches, even that crack.
Did the neck break off?
No, you know what? We did a CAT scan on this guitar as well.
Okay.
The original one.
Right.
So we could see the chambering style and even asked the doctor, if you will, hey, can you take a closer examination of that crack? We found out that the wood is not cracked, just the finish was.
Like you may bank it just enough that the lacquer just kind of split, turn it around. Yeah.
So we included that crack on this guitar. And when Danny opened the case up and pulled it out, I mean, the expletives that was coming out of his mouth was amazing.
Yeah.
Steve Stern, we looked at each other and gave the thumbs up because we knew he liked it.
But that reaction, see, that's the thing. And that has got to be, as someone like you and the other guys that work for Gretsch that are passionate about this sort of thing. To have him react that way.
Oh, man, yeah.
Just makes it all worth it. And one. Two, this is George Harrison's bloodline. This is his kid reacting to his father's guitar that you guys had replicated so perfectly.
Yeah.
So in another way, I feel like, that deserves another, kind of like pat on the back. You're like, this is awesome.
This is what we do.
Yeah. And it makes it all worth it,
Yeah.
Amazing.
So come full circle and to know and to actually have the original guitar and hold it.
Yes.
And strum my, dopey chords that I know and licks, knowing that, I Want to Hold Your Hand was recorded on that album, on that guitar from the first Beatles album. And so, very historic piece of musical instrument there.
I understand making that connection, just had a little bit of the magic rub off. There's certain stages that you could play on, things like that, where you feel it, That's amazing.
And that's what I love about this job.
Yeah.
Let's go move on. I got some other cool things I want to show you.
Yes, let's do.
Go.
All right, so where are we heading now,
All right, Ian, let's check out our Gretsch Wall of Fame.
Okay.
Here at our FMIC headquarters. Chet Atkins, I mean, come on.
Of course. How many signature models does he
Mr.
have?
Guitar. Gosh, I want to say there's 17.
Yeah, I was going to say 10 or 12, so
Yeah.
that would have been wrong.
But here again, there was the very first 6120 with the Western regalia on it. And what a fabulous guitar player he was. And even the name Chet Atkins is synonymous with a style of music.
Yep.
One guitar player meets another. Hey, what are you into? You could say Chet Atkins, immediately it's a thumb picker, and the thumb is doing one thing and the other fingers are doing something totally different, right?
And which I want to speak to actually really quick, is also synonymous with the Gretsch name.
Oh, totally.
But also, one of the things we can't see that well, but one of the only guitars that has the mutes.
Oh, that's right.
Right? The Country Gentleman,
Yes.
the Chet Atkins Country Gentleman has the mutes.
Mute system.
Which I love. If you can't really mute it, you're like, I'll throw those mutes up and I can still be a little more open palmed, top or bottom. I think that was such a clever design. I love that.
It was. And that particular model of a Country Gentleman with the double mute system is the same guitar that George used on the Ed Sullivan Show.
That's okay. There you go.
The big Country
All the way
Gentleman.
back to where we started.
There we go.
All right.
All right, here we go. Eddie Cochran, holy smokes, man, wow.
Yep.
We're talking first generation rock and roll.
Yep.
And, that's a great bar argument. Where did it begin? A lot of people will say Elvis Presley, which, okay, I can go with that. And but Eddie Cochran was right behind him. And I've got his biography and I've read some stuff about him, that he was certainly influenced big time by Elvis Presley. In fact, prior to seeing Elvis, he had a musical act with another guy. They were called the Cochran Brothers, but they weren't brothers.
Okay.
And after Eddie saw Elvis, that's the direction he wanted to go. He broke away from the other guy and started his own thing. Rock and roll was starting to happen. Again, it's very stylized, with the hair. He was great looking. He was a great guitar player.
Yep.
And played a...
This is the country, this is the 6120 we
Yeah.
looked at too.
There you go.
Here, yeah.
Yeah, the same guitar. There you go. And it's the same model as this one right here on the wall.
Yep.
With the steer horns and stuff.
Yep.
But just a fabulous guitar player, handsome. To me, he was like the first rock and roll god, if you will.
Yep.
Because he played the guitar so well, and all his songs, he wrote them and sang them, and died way too young. And that's a real shame. I think he could have gone on to be as big as, if not, could have been bigger than Elvis, if you will.
Yeah, it's true.
I had a Gretsch fanatic share a photograph with me. I have it right here, that as the story goes, this is Eddie Cochran died in a car crash with Gene Vincent. It was the first tour that they did of England together.
Okay.
And so even the posters that were printed for their shows, American rock and roll artist, come to England.
Right.
And this is his skin looks kind of weird, though. Back in the early days of rock and roll, before they went on stage, they used to wear pancake makeup because of the lighting.
Right.
And that's what he's got on his face right now. Obviously, he's right before a show.
I was gonna say it almost looks like a movie shoot,
Yeah,
like
there you go.
Eyeliner and
There you go.
Looks like with the tan.
There you go.
Almost looks like a little piece is missing right there. Yeah.
He must have scratched this.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is backstage. He's standing with a Gypsy Rosalie. That's who, obviously, later in years, who came up through the vaudeville of Americana entertainment, if you will, before movies started happening. And as movies were starting to come into vogue, I guess the claim to fame for Gypsy Rosalie, who brought burlesque to help fill those empty seats in theaters.
Exactly.
And she was a real pioneer of that type of entertainment.
Yeah, but of the tease, the strip tease.
There you go.
Which is funny, that actually kind of ties back into Gretsch, because the burlesque thing of today, which is based on a vintage thing, but it's really attached to the rockabilly world.
Sure.
Where there's a lot of Gretsch guitars.
Yes.
Right, so it's kind of funny how it all sort of just comes back
The orbit
full
always,
circle. Yeah.
There you go. What she's doing here, apparently, the story that was told to me when the guy who gave me this photo, I have no reason to question it, but I'm getting the second hand.
Right.
To help earn money later her years, she was reading palms. And the photographer who took this picture, as the story goes, that she was reading his palm. When the car crash that he died in the car was Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, and his fiance. They were about to get married. So Eddie asked her, "Am I going to have a successful marriage?" She looked into his palm while they were taking this picture and says, "I don't see a marriage in your hand." He died a few days later.
Wow.
That's creepy
is
stuff.
intense. That's creepy, it's intense. Wow.
That's really, very
And if
cool.
that's a true story, That is amazing.
It's very, very cool. Let's move down this way.
Okay.
Brian Setzer, of course, which Gretsch acknowledges that Brian Setzer single-handedly relit the fuse again for Gretsch guitars.
I would definitely say that's true.
By the time the Stray Cats came into the scene, music scene, they kind of rode into the new wave era of music, where the Knack and bands of that era were skating ties and cutting their hair. He kind of came into that thing through that scene, but yet now we call it rockabilly. But back then, when it came on the scene, it was very different.
Yeah,
but way cool.
There was a cool rockabilly scene in LA, right about 79, 80.
Right,
anyway,
sure.
So there was kind of a revival, but it was very small. And let me just say,
sure,
I have that exact guitar.
I love that guitar.
I have that guitar. I have that color. I have that exact guitar.
Very, very cool.
Which you know. I just wanted to say it on camera.
Billy Gibbons, of course.
Yep.
This is the guitar that was, we make this Jupiter Thunderbird to this day. The guitar originally was given to Billy Gibbons by Bo Diddley. And as Billy Gibbons tells a story, it was given to him, he put it in storage, and years later he forgot about the guitar and brought it back out again and started using it and approached us about remaking it. So there's the Jupiter Thunderbird.
I love it, and one of my favorites. And going back to what you were saying about rock and roll,
first generation, right there.
I think he may have been the guy who invented it. People will argue Chuck Berry, these guys. I think Bo Diddley did it, or if not, he definitely invented.
But how I like the story that Fred Gretsch tells, how hip Fred Gretsch's uncle was. He says that Bo Diddley came into that Brooklyn factory at 60 Broadway is the address in Brooklyn, New York. And Bo came in there one day and said he was already a big star and wanted to have a guitar made. And he said that Fred tells a story that Bo went to other companies. Nobody would make that guitar.
The square guitar.
That's rectangular shaped guitars. And how hip that they go, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Same thing with this instrument.
Yeah, well, I thought, didn't Gretsch didn't already have this? So this is based on the square, then they stylized it a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, but Bo had the guitar built, though he had several of them.
Okay.
And then gave one of them to Billy Gibbons.
That's
cool?
So great. Very cool.
And then lastly over here we've got the Reverend Horton Heat. Holy smokes, who's still on the scene and ripping it up everywhere he goes, man.
I'm 37 years old. I've been seeing him since I was probably 19, 20. And again, and like Brian, I will say for my age group, or even my generation, I think he always had the Gretsch.
Yeah,
he always
identified with that guitar.
He's very identifiable with it, and also made that brand, to the young people that were getting into rockabilly in the mid '90s to late '90s, where there was kind of a revival again. Sure. He was right there at the forefront with the instrument. You know,
great guitar player. Man.
He's an amazing guitar player.
He's a great guitar player, great vocalist. His whole show, the whole thing's awesome.
It's a great show.
Awesome.
Well, this is fantastic.
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
Come on, Ian, I got one more thing I want to show you here.
All right.
Check this out. And I just got this a few days ago from Mr. Gretsch. It's a copy of the 1914-1915 Gretsch catalog from Brooklyn, New York. There's the Gretsch building as it looked back then. That building still stands today.
Wow.
Let's see.
This is a thick catalog.
Yeah, it was 120 pages or something like that.
Okay, I'm curious to see what was going on inside here.
Music Trades, July 1914. Here we go. Practically overlooking the Brooklyn Plaza of the Williamsburg Bridge, which of course the Williamsburg Bridge still stands today.
Sure.
Is the looms up as a monument to the Gretsch policies as the powerful advertisement for the Gretsch products. So again, this is just their, they sold cymbals. Here's a whole list of things that they were offering back in the day. Flutes, band instruments, orchestras were the instruments of the day.
Yeah.
Accordions.
Jeez.
Right? Accordions were real popular back then.
Of course.
And it was under the Eagle brand.
And this is interesting that, the Gretsch was versatile enough of a company to, over the years, shift with
The Times.
The Times.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think there's banjos, which
Yeah.
you guys still do make banjos.
We still do, yes, of course. And
But there was, band instruments. Look at here's
batons for the conductor, right?
they made the
For the conductor. Here we got some guitars.
Oh,
At that time, they were under the Rex name, is what the brand name that they were using at that time.
on the headstock it
On the
said
head-
Rex. Okay, I gotta remember that if I'm ever.
There you go. See, Rex guitars.
Yeah. And these are all nylon string or some steel?
There's some steel, some nylon.
Okay.
And really, they didn't start making guitars with their own name on it until the late 20s, early 1930s.
Okay.
And to the point of this, I know here in the FMIC building, the Fender guys are really proud to say, gee, we started in the 40s at the dawn of rock and roll. I always like to point to this picture up here. The two guys in this picture up here, the guy on the left is Django Reinhardt.
Of course it is, yep.
And the guy on the right was Harry Volpe.
Okay.
And Harry Volpe and Django Reinhardt were the Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jeff Beck of the 1930s and the 40s.
Absolutely.
They were awesome guitar players. They were fronting bands and had their own radio shows. And it's a great picture of them playing their Gretsch guitars. Very, very cool.
Great picture. And actually what's really funny about that is before I knew that you even had that up there, I was going to ask if there was any gypsy style guitars in here.
You're going to say, no, I don't think so.
Because that's too early for 1914.
Sure. You're right.
But Django, no, gypsy jazz.
There you go.
Of course. And he was definitely one of my favorites.
Talk about overcoming adversity from the accident from his hand.
Damaged.
Burned,
Yep.
Played with 2 fingers.
Yep.
Amazing.
I heard that I watched, there's some moving images of Django
Yes.
on YouTube. The pinky didn't work.
Right.
It seems like the ring finger, he could kind of
figure out.
For the triads, he would do the big bump, bump, bow, 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 bow things he would do. But yeah, if you listen to Django, you hear this, boom, you're like, what does he have, 900 fingers?
Yeah.
2 fingers, do all that. The guy was amazing.
Amazing. There you go. Harmonicas,
Yep,
of course,
course.
were popular instruments back in the early 1900s.
He on the Rex brand for the mandolins
same
also.
thing, yeah.
And these like the round back. That's really, wow. Oh, look at this.
Banjos.
Yeah.
Crazy. Here's cases and violin bows. Violins, of course, were popular way back then.
Isn't that amazing?
And let's look at here's a violin bow for $14.
Or the whole outfit. Like for $20,
that's right,
I think it's the violin and the case and the bow with rosin, tuners, strings, everything for $20.
That's cool, man.
Can you imagine?
Way cool. Cool stuff. A lot of history.
I had no idea that Gretsch was that big of a company. Now, what were they doing at the very, very beginning, 130 some odd years ago?
Yes, at the very, very beginning, they started off with drums and banjos. That's where it started, drums and banjos and rhythm instruments.
Yeah, okay.
And as the story goes, it was after 12 years from when they started the company, so now we're talking the early 1900s, Friedrich Gretsch, who started the company, was 25 years old. He made his first trip back to Mannheim, Germany, was where the family was from. There was no airplanes yet, so he had to take the big boat back. On that boat ride back, he got cholera and died shortly after arriving, sent a telegram to his wife, Rosa, and ended up turning the company over to their oldest son. That's what you did back then.
You're right.
The oldest son was 15 years old. He ended up running the company for 49 years.
From 15 years old on.
There you go.
That is incredible.
And that was a Fred. Fred had 3 sons, and one of those 3 sons was William Gretsch, or Bill, and his son is Fred Gretsch, who owns the company now.
Yeah, bro, there you go.
It's all about family.
That is absolutely amazing. I think we've covered a lot today.
I appreciate you coming down.
I appreciate you having us. The Arizona trip has been amazing. We got beautiful weather, actually.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Steve Hunter, who
fabulous guitar,
who's a friend of yours and a great guitar player.
Yep.
We spoke to. We had a great time meeting him, and he's out here in Arizona.
Sure.
So we really appreciate you having us out and showing us around.
Oh, you're welcome.
We love the product.
Thanks, so do I.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much.
We'll see you down the road.
Sounds good. All right.